Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, we do pick up with Uncanny X-Men number 276. Now, the opening pages of this book reminds us what happened in the previous story arc. You see, back in Uncanny X-Men number 275, we saw the X-Men having to team up with the Starjammers and Charles Xavier to help out Illyandra, because by this point in Marvel Comics, she had lost control of the Empire, the Shi'ar Empire. By this point in Marvel Comics, Deathbird had taken over the Empire. Now, luckily for Illyandra, the X-Men were able to help her to regain control of the Empire. But here comes the big problem, though. You see, while you had everybody celebrating and having a good time, well, out of nowhere, different members of each team began to just get taken out left and right, and no one knew what exactly was going on. But at the very end of the book, we saw Gladiator and also Oracle try to take down Charles Xavier, but he was able to take over their minds, and so now they're under his control. But it seemed like this man is not done yet. It really seemed like Charles Xavier has turned evil, and apparently he has some big plans coming very soon. So as we dive into Uncanny X-Men number 276, we do pick up with Charles Xavier telling Gladiator to just do some crazy things to Deathbird. Now, at first, it does seem like they're going to kill her off, but they want to torture her for a tad bit. And so we see Gladiator being able to rip off her wings. And you're kind of like, dang, Charles Xavier, like what in the world is going on with you? But it does get to the point where we actually see Gladiator about to kill off Deathbird. Now, no one else is in the room to see this except for Gambit and Jubilee. And so right when you see Gladiator about to kill off Deathbird, that is when you have Gambit realize that he has seen enough and he has to help her out. Now, we already know, when it comes to Gambit, this man does not have the ability to bring down a character like Gladiator, because Gladiator is one of the many versions of Superman in Marvel Comics. Like, this man has the ability to bring down Gambit without any kind of struggle, but for the sake of the story, we do see Gambit being able to hold his own. Now, when it comes to Deathbird, she is able to rejoin the battle and actually do some damage to Charles Xavier, but in the middle of the battle, she is grabbed by Gladiator and thrown through a wall. Now, on the other side of that wall is Lila. Now, we have talked about her before. When it comes to Lila, she has the ability to teleport across the universe. In our last video, we saw her take the X-Men across the universe to supposedly save Charles Xavier, except when they had arrived at that location, they were confronted by Deathbird, who said, actually, I brought you guys here to kill off Charles Xavier. Now, right now, it seems like Deathbird's plan is not really a bad plan, because it seems like Charles Xavier has turned evil. Now, when it comes to Lila, she does grab Deathbird and they leave Gambit and Jubilee behind as they teleport away. But when it comes to Gambit and Jubilee powers, they do cause a huge explosion. Now, with that kind of explosion, you do have the rest of the X-Men run into the room to figure out what exactly happened. Now, when they do arrive, they see that Gladiator is protecting Charles Xavier, and apparently Deathbird had tried to attack Charles, is what they tell everyone else in the room. Now, they also realize that Gambit and Jubilee are no longer in the room, but their powers were used to cause that explosion. So what happened to Gambit and Jubilee? Now, everyone is somewhat relieved to see that Charles is okay, but you didn't have Wolverine begin to sniff around the room, and he realized that there's something off with Charles Xavier. Now, unfortunately, this is not Wolverine telling the rest of the X-Men like, hey, that's not Charles. Instead, you have Wolverine just go ahead and just kill off Charles Xavier. Yes, you heard that right. He kills off Charles Xavier. Now, right after you had Wolverine do that, you didn't have Psylocke come behind Wolverine to use her psychic knife on the mind of Logan to just completely shut him down. Now you would think, okay, they now have time to breathe. No, they don't, because then you have Deathbird and also Lila reappear. Except when they do, they brought some heavy weapons with them, and they cause another explosion in the room. Now, after the explosion, you then have Lila being able to use her powers once again to grab most of the X-Men herself and also Deathbird to teleport away. Now, the reason why I said most of the X-Men because, well, Psylocke does not go with them at all. She gets left behind. And you have Storm wondering, why in the world are you leaving her behind? But also, we still have no idea what happened to Gambit, what happened to Jubilee. Now for Illyandra, she's so heartbroken about the idea that the man she loved is no longer around, that he is completely gone. Now you do have Lord Chamberlain, who kind of works very close to Illyandra, send her away so that he is able to deal with the body of Charles Xavier correctly. Now, I said correctly because he tells her that, like, hey, you know what? Go ahead and leave, get some space, take the time to realize the man you love is gone. I'm gonna take care of the body. But he completely destroys the body, leaving nothing behind except ashes. And then he grabs the leader of the Starjammers, Corsair, and says, go find the X-Men now. Go find Deathbird and go find Lila and bring them back over here. And so you have Corsair and the Starjammers leave. Now let's not forget that Corsair is the father to Cyclops and Havoc. Now we do see that the X-Men, Deathbird, and Lila were teleported over to a nearby planet. Now the reason why Deathbird and Lila brought the X-Men to this world is to show them what happened to this world. It's completely wrecked. There's no one alive at all except our heroes and Deathbird. And the reason why? Because of Charles Xavier. Now, for our X-Men, they cannot believe in the idea that that Charles Xavier actually did this. But you have Deathbird say, no, that is the reason why I brought you here for. You see, as I was the ruler of the Shi'ar Empire, I began to hear about different attacks across the universe on different worlds, and those worlds were being wiped out completely. But the people who were killing off all these different worlds kept saying they were doing it in my name. But the problem is, I was not involved in those schemes. But the problem was, the Empire began to believe it was Deathbird who was involved in all those attacks, because for a long time, she was a bad guy in Marvel Comics, so it only makes sense that she would do something like this. And so you have Deathbird say she figured out it was Charles Xavier, but she realized it couldn't be the Charles Xavier that she knew, that it's somebody else pretending to be him and acting this way as a way to frame him, but to also get rid of me, but to also bring back Illyandra. But they also have other plans also, but the problem is, we have no idea what those other plans are. And so for the X-Men, as they walk around this world, they see that, yeah, it's completely wrecked because of this fake Charles Xavier. And they realize that they have no choice but to work with Deathbird. The only ones who are with Deathbird and Lila is Storm, Forge, and Banshee. When it comes to Psylocke, Jubilee, Gambit, and Wolverine, well, they're with the Imperial Guards. Now, the Starjammers, they are able to find Deathbird, Lila, and the rest of the X-Men who are with them. But in the middle of that battle right there, you have Deathbird just freak out, and she says, we have to leave. She grabs Lila, and those two teleport away, leaving Storm, Banshee, and also Forge to fight against the Starjammers on their own. But I want to jump over to Illyandra's spaceship, and here is the reason why. So far we have seen that Charles Xavier was acting weird earlier before being killed off by Wolverine. But now we're seeing Psylocke currently using her abilities to control the mind of Jubilee and Illyandra. So now we know that even Psylocke is not acting normal like she usually does. Something is off. And the reason why? Because The Charles we saw earlier and the Psylocke we see now are actually Skrulls. Yes, you heard that right, Skrulls, who broke away from their empire, and their main goal is to take over the Shi'ar Empire, and the best way to do that is to control Lilandra. And so what they did was they went around kidnapping different people who were close to her, like Charles Xavier, Psylocke, the Starjammers, and once they were able to kidnap those people, they then used their shapeshift abilities to replace them and pretend to be those people. And so when it comes to Psylocke, this is not our Psylocke. She's currently tied up in some kind of web matrix alongside with Wolverine and also Jubilee. Now things get even crazier because the leader of this group of Skrulls then changed his body into Charles Xavier because Lilandra has to believe that Charles is alive. And so to make sure that he is alive, this Skrull has to pretend to be Charles Xavier, but to also use the powers of Charles to control her mind as she regains control of the Empire. And so in the eyes of the people of the Shi'ar Empire, Lilandra is in control, but in reality, it's going to be this Skrull pretending to be Charles Xavier. But as we jump into Uncanny X-Men number 277, we actually do pick up with Storm, Banshee, and Forge trying to fight against the Starjammers. Now, as the battle goes on, they don't realize that Gambit is on their ship. And so while you have the Starjammers trying to bring down our heroes, Gambit is able to pull off a surprise attack. And the battle does go on for a few more pages, but unfortunately at the end of the battle, we're kind of left to believe that Storm, Forge, Gambit, and also Banshee have completely lost against the Starjammers, who are really Skrulls pretending to be the Starjammers. Now, when it comes to Lila and Deathbird, they are able to sneak back onto the ship of Lilandra. But the problem is that as soon as they get back on the ship, they are then confronted by the Skrulls, who are pretending to be the characters we all know so very well and love. And so now you have Deathbird and Lila trying to fight against them. Now, in the middle of the battle, the real Charles Xavier, who is currently tied up right now, is able to use his powers to tell Lila, hey, go there and then bring these folks here to help you out. And so in the middle of the battle, she disappears, but then she comes right back with some reinforcements, and we kind of find out the Starjammers had lost the battle against Storm, Banshee, Forge, and Gambit, but now Deathbird can work alongside with them to bring down the Skrulls. Now, this is where we see the story begin to wrap up very quickly. So let me explain. So you do have the X-Men being able to fight against the Skrulls that were pretending to be our heroes. And while the battle goes on, our heroes are winning, taking down each and every single one of them, except it all comes down to the last Skrull, and that will be the one that's pretending to be Charles Xavier. And he is able to use the abilities of Charles Xavier to knock out the entire team. And so it looks like our heroes did all that work for nothing. But while the battle was going on, the web matrix that was holding up the real version of our heroes, well, that got damaged, being able to free Charles Xavier. And because Charles can walk right now, he walks right behind the fake Skrull pretending to be him and just knocks him out. Just like that. One good punch in the face and the day is saved. Now the story does get wrapped up very quickly, and let me explain how. So you do have Charles Xavier tell the real Starjammers to help out Lilandra to go through the Empire to make sure that there's not any more Skrulls out there pretending to be other people part of the Empire. Now you also have Charles Xavier read the mind of Storm. Now when he does that, that is the moment he learns what's happening back on Earth at the moment. The idea that, well, the Shadow King is back, and the Shadow King is doing a lot of damage to all the members of the X family. And so for Charles, he has to go back home. And so technically, This does lead into a story arc called the Muir Island Saga, but before we can cover that crossover, we have to cover another crossover, and that's one called Kings of Pain, and we'll cover that one in our next video. So with that being said, please guys, leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.